All right, folks, well, let's get started. Welcome to today's Privacy Exchange Community Show and Tell series with our very special guest, Tim Hyman. Tim is a data privacy and technology veteran offering data privacy consulting. He serves as a DPO to clients in legal, insurance, management consulting, and more. And Tim is the author of the first ICO-approved UK GDPR certification scheme for legal services, which we'll spend a majority of our time today talking about, and some others that he has in the works. So let's contextualize this. We've got SOC 2 framework for security controls. We have ISO 27001 standard for information security management. But when it comes to privacy compliance, especially under laws like GDPR, most organizations are relying on legal opinions and self-assessments. That is until now, because now we have some standardized audible benchmarks because Tim has created some. So today we'll talk about the standard Tim created, how businesses are implementing that standard, and how privacy standards can improve your business. So we'll have about 25 minutes today total. Tim and I will talk for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up for audience Q&A. At that point, we will turn off the recording, so feel free to ask whatever questions you'd like in a non-recorded way. And as a reminder, any information we share today is for general information purposes only. It's not legal advice. So if you have a legal question, please talk to your own legal counsel. Okay, with all that behind us, Tim, are you ready to get started?
I am indeed, yes.
Well, thank you again for having us, or for coming. Okay, so GDPR Articles 42 and 43 allow for regulator-approved privacy certifications. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and why these standards are important?
Yeah, sure. So the quickest way to describe why the certifications exist is this. If I speak to the CEO or managing director of any organization, I will say to them, are you GDPR compliant? Now, 99 times out of 100, they will turn around and say, yeah, of course we are. That's great, good to know. Second question, how do you know? And then you get the tumbleweed moment, the silence. Then they think a bit and they might say, well, we had this consultant tell us we were in 2018, or Fred in the compliance department told us we are. So in other words, you don't know. And that is the crux of why Article 42 and Article 43 exist. Essentially, when they, and I know this because there was an interview with a number of the individuals who participated in the authoring of the GDPR. And the challenge is this, that you've got a one-size-fits-all piece of legislation that is huge, that covers the whole of Europe and every single business within every country in Europe. That's a massive piece of legislation, one of the biggest that had happened for a long, long time. And when you're creating legislation like that, lawyers are lawyers, you end up with all sorts of ambiguities. Great example is one of the requirements to understand whether or not you need a DPO is if you process large volumes of special category data. So what does large volumes mean? Is it 10? Is it 100? Is it 1 million? It's who knows. And the problem with, and that's classic legalese. And the problem with legalese is it leads to interpretation. And the problem with interpretation is it's not clear. And the worst thing for businesses is a lack of clarity. So on the one hand, we need legislation that works for whether you're a one-person organization or a multi-million person international organization. But on the other hand, business wants clarity. So what they did was they said, right, Article 42 and Article 43 say that to try and help here, supervisory authorities or the regulators in each of those countries can approve certifications. And these will be official certifications. And there's a couple of things to note here. One is they don't create them, they don't write them, they can only approve them. So it takes someone from the industry to put a certification forward to the regulator, And if the regulator agrees that this certification would meet all of their requirements to the point that they would say, yes, you're compliant with the law, then it becomes an official certification. And the reason it's massively important to them is there's another article that doesn't get talked about a lot, but Article 83 of GDPR, which is the article that tells regulators how they're allowed to penalize organizations. That article says, if an organization has got an Article 42 official certification, it must be taken into account and therefore the penalty is reduced. So they know that if they're going to sign off these certifications, that they also have to take that into account. And we hope that they never have to penalize you. But if they do, because you can never say never, even a certified organization could have a data breach one day, but they have to take that into account and they have to reduce your penalties. So that is why certifications exist. It's really to help businesses, give them some clarity, give them some standardization, and for the first time, prior to certifications existing, actually measure your compliance and then audit your compliance. Because otherwise you really are just relying on someone's opinion.
That is fascinating. I'm glad you shared the backstory of why the authors of the GDPR included that. And thank you for tying in Article 83 as well about reducing fines in the event that comes up. So this is interesting because it was written, GDPR was written many years ago, came online, is it 7 years now? What
Well,
year?
it was published in 2016 and it gave everybody 2 years to get ready. So it became law in 2018.
So 7 years. And now you've done a first. You've written the first certification for legal services.
Yeah.
Tell me about that process because I know it wasn't a quick one. No. So why did it take so long? I'm assuming it's because it's robust. But tell me about how you got to where you are now.
Well, I'll give you the quick backstory of why I even did this. So I've been delivering DPO as a service since GDPR came into force in 2018. And with many of I actually got, I certified as a DPO at the University of Maastricht and then started delivering this as a service. And then I noticed with many of my clients, they're absolutely reliant on me telling them that they're compliant. And then all the other people out there offering DPO as a service, same thing. And who are we to say an organization is compliant? So it's still all about someone's opinion. And so I thought, okay, that's interesting. Then I was asked to help the Council of Europe in Strasbourg because the EU told all of the international organizations around the world, you've got to pass our Pillar 9 assessment, which is the EU's way of assessing them. We're going to send auditors in and you need to pass an audit or you lose your funding. And so I was helping the Council of Europe and I got them through this. They passed their assessment and they got their funding. And then I worked with a few more, 7 in the end, different international organizations around the world who had the same challenge with the EU. And I thought, actually, this is a really good thing because there's kind of, from an IT background, there's a black and white bit here. The auditors have given us in advance, this is what we're going to audit you on. You need to get ready. You need to evidence it. If you've got it, we'll mark you down as compliant. You get your funding. And I thought, this is great. We've got clarity. We can treat it almost as a project to get ready. And then we understand what we have to do to maintain this standard going forward, which is just as important because privacy should not be a project. It should be a culture. And most organizations treat it as the former, but they need to move it to the latter, which is embedded within the organization. And the way that's done is with a certification, you have reassessments and you have surveillance audits, and this helps you maintain and embed the culture as opposed to just treat it as a one-off. And I thought this is great. And then when the ICO, which is the UK's regulator, opened up its Article 42 certification program, I thought, okay, everything I've learned from what went well in these international organizations, I'm going to put to author one for legal services, which just happened to be the majority of my clients at the time. For that. Now, why did it take 3 years? Well, Here is the challenge. And let's go back to that. Let's another example, record of processing activities. So you've got you've got the law. The law says, article whatever, you must have a record of processing activities. It must record what type of data, the categories of data subjects, stuff. The regulator says, if we come into an organization because there's a problem, we will ask you for your record of processing activities. You must show us evidence your record of processing activities. And here's what we're going to look for. We're going to look for everything that GDPR says, and that needs, you must be recording information around your business. Why have you got a ROPA? Because it demonstrates to us as the regulator that you understand your business, you know where data is in your business, and that you've got a good comprehension of where personal data is being processed. That's all good, but now you've got an auditor. And an auditor who wants to come in and say, yes, you passed your certification or not. The auditors don't even understand data protection. They are black and white guys that say, that's pass, that's fail. Now, here's your challenge. You've got the law, which can be ambiguous. You have a regulator that says, well, we know what we think compliance looks like. And you've got an auditor that says, well, I have to pass or fail this, so I need a checklist. And so this is why it took 3 years. So just the ROPA as an example, everything's a compromise. The ICO said, well, we like to see a ROPA that is got all the categories, all the data, you understand your business. The auditor says, yeah, but we don't know what a good ROPA or a bad ROPA looks like. We're not going to do a qualitative assessment. We're not going to read every single thing in a ROPA and say, well, that doesn't represent your HR department. So how do we say pass or fail? So the compromise was, okay, it must exist as a document, great. It must have all the headings, great. It must be populated as a document, great. And it must be regularly updated. So it can't have been done a year ago. If it ticks all of those, you as an auditor can say pass. You don't need to say that's a good quality ROPA or a bad quality ROPA. Now that's just the ROPA. If you go down all of GDPR and turn that into a set of controls that you're prepared as a regulator to say, yeah, you meet all of that, you are compliant with the GDPR. It takes a long time with each of them to see that compromise of, well, that's what you want as a regulator, and that's what you want as an auditor to be able to say pass or fail. Because there is no 70% pass mark or, you know, red, amber, green. It's pass or fail. So that's why it took so long.
That is fascinating. I love that you had to get in so much detail of like, is the ROPA actually even populated?
Yeah.
Because it is a black and white pass fail. Does it exist? Yes, but how good is it? So I'm curious, can you delve a little deeper about what your certification entails? I'm assuming it has a section about ROPA since we just talked about that. What are some of the other elements in the certification for the financial services that you've put forth?
Yeah, so, well, for example, well, the financial services certification, that's not live yet. That one's still under review.
Oh, I'm sorry, the legal services.
Yeah, so
Jump the gun
basically, the starting premise is, the way the regulators look at this is, what we are certifying is a processing activity. And what, in other words, the scope of the certification is predefined, i.e. the sector's predefined, it's legal services in this case. There are other certifications. So the sector is predefined legal services. But what are we actually looking at here? We're looking at a processing activity. So what's the definition of the processing activity? Well, it is quite simple. It is that the likes of you and I and everyone on this call, we need to use lawyers periodically sometimes in our life. Could be conveyancing, moving a house. It could be a will or estate because someone's died, or it could be a legal matter that has to go to court. But we will all use lawyers. Now, we give our personal data to lawyers, a lot of it. And in some cases, some very sensitive personal data. And then we trust them. That's it. We just trust them to go and do what they should be doing, treat our data properly, not share it with people they shouldn't be, certainly not sell it, all those things. But it's pure trust that we are working on. Now, the certification means that the organization must demonstrate that all of the GDPR provisions around the processing of our data as a client is compliant with the GDPR. In other words, they're only collecting the data they should, they're only using it for the purposes they should, it's properly secured, it's only the people who need access to it have access to it, it's only kept as long as it should be kept. Everything you can imagine that's within GDPR as a core principle is then broken down into controls, and the controls are broken down into sections such as rights. There's a section on what our rights are as a client. We've got the right to access our data. We've got the right to have our data erased. We've got the right to have our data moved from one law firm to another law firm, whatever it is. And so therefore, if you take that section, the section on rights, the controls, much like 27001, as was mentioned earlier, or SOC 2 will say, you must have a process in place that enables a data subject to erase data. You must have a process in place that enables a data subject or client to access their data. You must verify their identity before you allow access to their data, so on and so on. So the controls are written in a way that the organization trying to apply them can understand them and say, okay, do we have that? And is that in place? And then the auditor can come along and say, well, show me that you've got that in place. Yes, you have, tick. So you're starting with legislation, moving down to the regulator saying, well, this is what we would expect of you if ever we audited you, moving on to a set of controls that you as a law firm can read and say, do we do this? Can we evidence this? Moving on to the auditor that says, yep, I can see you do that, you pass. And that's kind of the way it's done.
I love this. So I'm curious about the real world experience because you've now had, what, 7 companies go through your certification? So
yes,
they've got the list of all the things they need to do. How
yeah.
did it work in practice? Did a lot of them realize they were missing,
Oh yeah,
or they had it on lockdown, everything was great? Like
yeah.
what happened?
So the way the process works is the standard itself, once you've got your standard approved and it's an official certification, it appears on the regulator's website for free, because that's the point. We want everybody to know what compliance looks like. So the standard is made free. And I just saw Ryan has provided a link to my particular standard that's on the ICO's website. Now, okay, that's the starting point. So we start with, why wouldn't you? Because if you're a law firm, why wouldn't you, for free of charge, download that standard so you've got something in front of you that says, this is what compliance looks like. Now, once you've done that, and once you see the standard, it might look quite complex. There's a lot in there. There's a lot to do. So the next job is you do a gap analysis against the standard. Now, if you've got the internal resources to do that, you do it. If you haven't, you engage an external consultant and say, well, look, we now know what we're supposed to be doing. Can you let us know how close we are to that? And so what we do, and other consultancies do, is they do a gap analysis for the firm against the standard and provide a report. And the report will say, yeah, okay, of these 56 controls, you're great in 53 of them. These 3 need some work. And that's a classic gap analysis report that you would do in any certification process, 27001, SOC 2, whatever, where you would say, you'd probably red, amber, green it and say, you're actually nowhere near this. You don't even have a ROPA. So yeah, don't get the auditors in yet because you will fail. Or you might say, well, yeah, you've got a ROPA, but I can see the edit date on it's 2018. So clearly nobody's actually done anything since you thought you had to fill some project in or something. So again, the auditor will pick that up. You need to do a bit of work. And that's the way that goes. Then, of course, the organization says, okay, thank you very much. You've highlighted these 10 things that I need to do to get to that level. And then they choose. They either say, well, we'll do those ourselves, or we'll use you to help us do these. And we'll set ourselves a 6-month period to get them done. And then when everyone's happy, the consultant and the firm, that, yeah, we're looking good, then you can apply to the certification body, who are independent, and they're independent of the ICO, they're independent of the scheme author, which is us. They're a completely independent body, and they're a certification body that's all they do. Certifications, they do 27001, they do 9001, they do SOC 2, they do this. And they'll come in and they'll be the black and white guys. They'll be the pass, fail. They'll be the evidence this, show me this. I'd like to see what your process is for this. And then if you pass that, you get awarded your certificate. And then you go on to an official ICO register of certified organizations.
Gotcha. So really, and thank you for sharing the link. I will look more deeply into this. So everyone can actually access the standard.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
Earning the certification takes that credential work. So an encouragement to anyone on the call to go ahead and take a look at Tim's standard and do that gap analysis either internally or with a consultant such as his. I'm curious. So if someone listening here wants to do this, which is great because it gives a legitimate benchmark and kind of like a to-do list of where you can improve, how can they sell the value of this certification to the business?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you hear this a lot. You hear this a lot around privacy because a lot of businesses, and I hear this more in the US than I do in Europe, of course, because it's a cultural thing. But a lot of businesses see things like privacy as a red tape barrier to productivity or profit. And of course, the way I look at it is certainly in the EU, a lot of our legislation and GDPR in particular comes from human rights. It's all about the human right of privacy. And you either are for that or you're against that, and you either see it as, you know, as a barrier to productivity. So how do we say to businesses, no, it's not like that at all? And it goes back to the previous conversation we were having really about consumer trust. And I do strongly believe that, particularly with things like AI coming along, which is really hitting trust hard, because we're already in a place where we're reluctant to trust AI output. And then when the organizations you know and love, particularly professional services like law firms or education or medical professions, if they start to use AI, we start to question how much we trust what they're doing, because our data is now thrown in there. And it's not just about the output of the AI being perhaps untrustworthy. Do we trust what they're doing with our data? Are they training AI models using our data? Are they, if they are those AI large language models that they're training publicly accessible? Is all my medical data now available around the world that I didn't think it was? No one told me, but and all of these things. So actually, the certification does a couple of things. Firstly, it says you can sleep at night, because if your fear is fear of penalty, then you need to know that that you're in the right space, or the space that you should be by law. And here's another really important thing. With things like 27001 and SOC 2 and all of those, they're great certifications that tell you, if you pass, you are operating at a best practice level. But there's no law. There's no law that says your IT standards need to be at this level. Privacy is different. Privacy is based on law. So you have a law over here saying you have to operate to this level. That's the law. The certification underneath that is all it is a way to measure yourself against that. So it's very different to areas where there is no law, because they're only best practice. This is best practice and confirmation to shareholders, everyone else, we're operating lawfully, and we need to be. So that's one element, which is the kind of needing to know that we are in that good space. And then there are other elements, and what's already starting to happen is anyone who gets involved in procurement, it can be very painful, where particularly if you're a US company and you're selling services to the EU, you're going to be getting these questionnaires with hundreds of questions about privacy and all the rest of it. And you're thinking, A, do I even know the answer to these questions? And B, this is painful. I get this every time. If you can create a standard that's accepted and recognized, you can absolutely cut out a lot of time, save a lot of money, because you are, again, based on trust, showing these organizations, look, we've already proven that we do operate in this good space. Therefore, that's got to be a good thing, right? And then, of course, there's the consumer. And ultimately, consumers will start to see that, like they do, I don't know, if you go into a restaurant and it's got a food standards thing on it, you're going to go, great, I like that. Or Trustpilot for a plumber or something, you know, these things all start to matter to consumers.
Wow, this is fascinating. I just took a note if you saw me typing, because there are some things I don't want to forget from this talk. Tim, this has been very interesting. We do have just 2 minutes left. I do
Right.
want to allow anyone, if you've got a question, feel free to pop off.